Hello, everyone. My name is Esther Lee, co-founder of the Chinese American Heritage Foundation. CAHF promotes the recognition, appreciation, and celebration of historical contribution made to the United States by citizens of Chinese heritage. Together, our stories will be shared and our voices amplified. Welcome to day 23 of our 31 days webinar celebrating AAPI Heritage Month. Today, our topic is change agents / influencers and moderated by Christine Chen, the Executive Director of Asian and Pacific Islanders American Vote. She will introduce our 4 amazing guests and today's program. So without further ado, here is Christine Chen.
Good evening, everyone. This week has been a tremendous week as we celebrate the signing of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And this is just only the beginning as we begin to heal from the last 12 to 16 months as we've seen the rise of the anti-Asian violence. With that, we've seen also so many people within our community leaning into this moment. These are change agents and influencers. They range from elected officials to federal employees, those in the military, doctors, artists, so many stories to be told. But today we will go ahead and feature 4 of those change agents. We'll feature some of the examples on how AAPIs are stepping into their leadership roles and making an impact in this moment to stop Asian hate. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn your attention to a video by Dr. Dagny, who represents many of the frontline workers who had to face the deadly ramifications of COVID-19 head on. Yet at the same time, they were not immune to the rising anti-Asian hate. This video, spearheaded by Dr. Zhu, is one of the first video responses to Asian hate at the beginning of COVID-19.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having me on this panel. It's such an honor. I'm happy to talk a little bit about what motivated us to make this a video. To give a little bit of background, I'm a board-certified eye surgeon who practices in Southern California. During the pandemic, I was still, providing emergency eye care, and a lot of my colleagues were seeing patients on the front line. And, being Asian American, a lot of us grew up being bullied, for looking different, being made fun of, and that was just accepted as normal, a normal part of growing up Asian American. But during the pandemic, something really changed. People were suddenly telling, us to go back to our country a lot more. They were calling us bat eaters, Chinese viruses, and a lot of these cases escalated into violence. And it wasn't happening just in the public, but in the hospitals and in clinics as well. And what's interesting is that about 20% of the physicians in America are Asian American. And so we were hearing these stories of our colleagues getting spit on by COVID patients, being harassed as we were, walking into our shifts in the early morning. And so the amount of aggression and discrimination that we were used to just got escalated, 1,000-fold during this time when everyone was just going through such a stressful time and basically scapegoating and finding someone to blame. And so my colleagues and I, there have always been a lot of us doctors on social media already, even before the pandemic, trying to fight misinformation and advocating for science and evidence-based medicine. But during the pandemic, a lot more of us came onto social media to spread that message and to spread actual facts. And so we decided to make this message in response to a lot of the hate that our colleagues were experiencing in the community. And a lot of the signs that we held up, those were real messages that we were receiving in our inbox, calling us bat eaters and things like that. And our only message was to spread love and positivity and instead of hate, because that's the only way to get through a pandemic and a crisis, is to stick together through all this unity. And even for myself, I came here as an immigrant from China. I was raised by a single mom. I went through a lot growing up, but I was able to go to Harvard Medical School, become a physician, and really achieve the American dream. But even then, a lot of my patients still saw me as foreign, and a lot of my colleagues experienced the same thing during the pandemic. So this was just our message to remind everyone that we are all human, no matter what we look like. And we were very fortunate that it got picked up by, a lot of news outlets like CNN, Huffington Post. And so it seemed like our message really resonated with a lot of people. And we did this last year at the beginning of the pandemic, even before, all the violence that happened this year. So we were very fortunate that we were able to spread that message. And thank you so much for allowing me to be on this panel.
Thank you so much for your leadership, and we look forward to having you, bringing you back on at the very end. Our next video features Lee Wong, who serves as chair of the Westchester's Board of Trustees, based in Ohio. As a fellow Buckeye, I'm especially proud of his courageous action that went viral. So at this time, please turn to the video.
Here is my proof. This is sustained through my service in the US military. Now, is this patriot enough? I have put up with a lot of shit in silence. Normally, I don't say much about things here happens unless it hit me. I just want to say that I came to this country when I was 18, just finished high school, came over here. So I'm 69 today. So if you break down in increments, 20, 20, 20, 40, 60, I spend more time over here than in the old country. I'm a US citizen for quite a while now, but most of them weren't even born yet. And I didn't come to this country to be sitting here elected official, okay? As I said before, unfortunate event happened to me when I was a couple years in the country, in Chicago, got beat up. And you heard this before, he went to court, he never got punished. And that changed the course of my career. I went to US Army to serve 20 years, active duty, 24/7, and retire, okay? For too long, I have put up with a lot of shit in silence. Excuse me the language. Too afraid to speak out, fearing more abuse and discrimination. Yeah. Then when I came out of the Army, I said, I'm going to make it a better community where I go to, wherever I live to serve. I mean, I do my best, do what is right. And then, you know, in the last few years, things are just getting worse and worse. People, don't get me wrong, people love me in this community. I love them too. But there are some ignorant people that will come up to me and say that I don't look American or patriotic enough. Now that really gets my goat. That as things escalate to a certain level, certain restaurants, a lot of Asian restaurants, they experience that too. And they are hardworking American, hardworking people, law-abiding citizens. Some even serve in the U.S. Armed Forces of America. Not Chinese Army, U.S. Army, U.S. military. You know, I'm getting a little hard on this issue here. People question my patriotism, that I don't look American enough. They could not get over this face. I want to show you something. I want to tell you, because I'm not afraid. I don't have to live in fear, intimidation, or insults. I'm 69 years old, and I'm going to show you what patriotism, the questions about patriotism looks like. Here is my proof. This is sustained from my service in the U.S. military. Now, is this patriot enough? I'm not ashamed to walk around anymore. Before I felt inhibited. People look at me strange. And they to question me, my loyalty to this country. I don't look American enough. Now, last I read the U.S. Constitution, we the people, we are all the same. We are equal. Not this, you are more superior, you are not. We need to be kinder, gentler to one another, because we are all the same. We are one human being on this earth. Well, that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Lee.
That time, I think everybody was shocked. Even I didn't know I was going to do that, take my shirt off. I was just in the heat of the moment. I ripped my shirt off, show my scar. I thought I need to show them what Americans look like. That takes all kinds of people, all shapes and sizes. I'm Wong. I never regret joining the U.S. Army. In fact, it was the best decision I ever made. I must say that I love this country with a soldier's passion. I'm an American by choice. Even so, I know our great nation has flaws, and the work of perfecting our union will never be done. The reality was brought home to me 1 year ago as I stood at a polling place in Hamilton, Ohio, when a fellow going in at a polling place stopped and got in my face, looked at me in the eyes with a sneer and said, "You don't look American to me." By the way, I was wearing my Army jacket, my Army retired cap, and a flag on my shoulder. I had previously endured a mocking by children in a grocery store who put their fingers on their round eyes and stretch them to resemble Asian slanted eyes. In March of this year, I decided to share the wounds I sustained during the training. That made an impression on several media outlets, and the reports of the incidents traveled to all corners of the world. Let me tell you why I did that. Reading about the rise in attacks against Asian Americans in the past few years, combined with my personal experiences over the last 50 years, caused my pot to boil over. I felt it was time to add my voice to those who were saying they had enough. Now I want to make this clear. America is not a racist country. We, like all nations, have people who do bad things. They are racist among us. But my message today is grounded, tonight is grounded in the wisdom of our founding fathers and our very Constitution. America is a work in progress. It was set up that way. It says so in our very Constitution. My message should be enough. We have no tolerance for those who hate and plot to turn white against black, black against Asians, Hispanic against black, or black against white, and everybody against everybody. And those who push groups to define American in terms of identities are the individual part of our great mosaic, rather than the beauty of the whole. Throughout our history, our country has made grave errors. Slavery is a stain on the conscience of America's soul. So too was the Exclusionary Act that forbid Chinese to become US citizens, marry non-Asians, or own any properties for 61 years. And then use the coolies, they call them, to build America's transcontinental railroad. And then internment of the fellow Japanese Americans into the internment camp during World War II. That was so wrong. And I felt that I should speak up. And America, I want to say that we should never give up on America. Greatness is in our DNA. I know we all look at our nations through the prism of our own experiences. And sometimes, particularly when the experience involves brutality, repression, racism, and maltreatment, it is difficult to look at the big picture. I know this from a personal experience, a painful experience. But I say to you tonight, who are leaders in our community across the nation, you have formed an alliance against hate. And America does not have any problems that more kindness, more love, more respect for each other, and more gentleness cannot solve. From these qualities, we can individually join together and weave a strong fabric of freedom that vibrantly displays the reality of the goodness that lies inside the soul of America. So I leave you with these words: be kind, be good citizens, and always keep the faith in our great country. We are Americans. Let's make America kind again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, for your inspiration and your leadership. Our next video, it actually focuses on the federal government. Every May, the federal government in this country recognizes Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. The federal government also plays an important role in uplifting the narrative, struggles, and accomplishments of this particular community. Our next video features Major General Garrett Yee.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major General Garrett Yee, Assistant to the Director of the Defense Information Systems Agency. As many of you know, May is Asian American Pacific Islanders, or AAPI Month. It's a time we put aside to focus on what people from backgrounds similar to mine contribute to the overall American culture. They are U.S. citizens who trace their lineage back to places like Japan, China, Taiwan, Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, the Philippines, Samoa, Fiji, Guam, and the Northern Marianas. Oftentimes, people outside the AAPI community think that this is a month for Asians to celebrate our cultures. Not exactly. What we are celebrating is what Asians and Pacific Islanders have added to the overall American culture. Imagine an America without Asian restaurants, martial arts, the musical genius of Yo-Yo Ma, fashion designer Vera Wang, Olympic figure skater Kristi Yamaguchi, Medal of Honor recipient and Senator Daniel Inouye, Yahoo founder Jerry Yang, or any of the 23 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders that contribute to America's workforce and fight in our wars. And while we are proud of where we come from, we are, after all, Americans first. A nation of people from all around the world coming together to form something unique, something greater than just the sum of our parts, a diverse group of people united by a common cause. That has never been more true than it was in the days, weeks, and months following the terrorist attack of 9/11. Those of us who lived through the time remember streets lined with American flags flown in front of homes from coast to coast. Strangers on the street began thanking military members for their service, and people being just a little nicer to one another. But we've been through a lot since then. 20 years of war, 3 presidents, 1 global pandemic. It feels like we've lost some of that collective kindness. Since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, extremists around the world have begun using the disease as justification for racially motivated violence. According to a recent study conducted at California State University, San Bernardino, anti-Asian hate crimes in the United States have increased nearly 150% in the years since the pandemic began. Much of the violence in the news is directed towards Chinese Americans due to the possible linkage of COVID-19's origination. Even more disturbing is the fact that the majority of the violence is directed towards the elderly, many of whom are not even Chinese descent, let alone ever visited that country. But this is not who we are as a nation. America is a nation of immigrants. America was founded on the principles of freedom and equality. As military members and federal employees, we take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What makes our oath unique is that it is not to a person, like other countries around the world, but to an idea. That idea is that all people are created equal. We pledge our loyalty to the Constitution of the United States, a document created to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility. America's strength comes from our ability to learn from one another, to gather the best parts of every culture and add them to our collective culture. Our citizens are not Asian Americans, or European Americans, or African Americans. We are Americans, a blend of many cultures, and we are better for that. Since World War II, many members of my family served in the United States military. My uncle Jimmy Eno was awarded a Purple Heart when he was wounded in Europe fighting with the famed 442nd Regimental Combat Team, an all-Japanese American Army unit. My Aunt Sue Kumagai was one of the first Asian American females to reach the rank of colonel when she served in the Army during the Vietnam War. In total, more than a dozen members of my immediate family donned the uniform of the United States military, each of them paving a way for the generation of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that followed. My story is only one of thousands that can only be told by members of our workforce. Throughout the month of May, DISA will be showcasing stories that highlight the Asian American and Pacific Islanders throughout the agency. Individuals who bring unique perspectives to our team through their history, culture, and contributions to the overall culture of this great nation. I hope that you will take a few minutes out of your busy day to check them out. Have a great day, and thank you for all that you do for our nation.
Good evening, and first of all, thank you to Esther for the invitation, as well as the Chinese American Heritage Foundation for hosting these series of webinars during the month of May. And thanks to Christine Chen for kind of moderating tonight's session. I feel like inadequate to be on this panel with three esteemed other panel members, very well known, and what a great contribution to what we're talking about tonight. And so, I would just say, maybe to the folks that are listening tonight, early on, I was like many, without a voice, without the ability to speak up about being Asian, about being of Chinese and Japanese descent. And I think it was just because I was just trying to get by and like so many, not make waves and not be noticed, just do my job and do a good job. But at some point, probably in my late 20s, I figured that, if I want to move forward as a leader, then we have to be brave sometimes and muster a little bit of courage and be not shy about talking about, who we are and things that are important to us. And so, I've been on boards and commissions and oftentimes reluctant to talk about, things that are, in the realm of, ethnicity or minority discussions, I guess. I'm struggling with what to, the right way to phrase this, but not being able to talk about this topic. But at some point in my 20s, I figured it out, right? I probably should have, figured that out earlier, but I think I figured I was doing fine just as I was. But what I've also learned, though, in the military, we are in the process of, trying to address the extremism that exists. The military is a microcosm of society, and there's extremism in society, and there's a little bit of that, or maybe more than a little bit of that in the military as well. And so for the past, 3 or 4 months, the military has been really focused on eradicating extremism, extremist views, racist views, racism in our ranks. And, it's not just, a voiceover type thing. This is a continuing effort to eradicate, do the best we can, racism and extremism in our ranks. Understanding that every day we bring in, more new recruits into our armed services. And so, it'll be a job never complete, because we are always bringing, fresh people into our military ranks, and they come from all parts of the country. And although there's talk about trying to, address that before they come in or when they first come in, we also know that extremist views do happen, after you come into any organization, to include the military. You get, kind of radicalized through online media, and that's not a secret. And so that is something that is a concern for us in the military, and so we're working on that. Me talking about this in the video as a major general, 2-star general in the United States Army is, probably not something you would have seen in the past, but it's what we take as a serious subject. And so, we were glad to put this video together. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I'll let the next person go on the panel, and then we'll have a panel. Back to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Major General Yi, for your voice in such a large institution such as the military and the federal government. And it's always, I just remember when you first became a 2-star general, I mean, it was such a highlight in the community because we need to continue to see that type of leadership. Our next special guest is a diversity and inclusion trainer, speaker, and author. Sara Ting will now recite a special reading of the Sun poem.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this very, very distinguished panel. And I want to applaud each person on this panel for their courage, for their tremendous courage, especially Dr. Zhu, working on the front line and experiencing what you had to and putting that wonderful video together, and for Major General Garrett and Lee Wong for your courage to speak out. And I just applaud all of you. So I wrote this poem called The Sun in 1978. It was written in a personal journal. Are you greater than the sun that shines on everyone, black, brown, yellow, red, and white? The sun does not discriminate. In listening to each of my distinguished fellow panelists here, a number of you mentioned discrimination and human being. That is exactly what this poem is about. It's about helping us see our common humanity. I didn't realize the power of this poem. As I said, it was written in a personal journal in 1978. In 1985, it became the centerpiece of a citywide multimedia public service campaign. The poem was put up on billboards, displayed in mass transit, produced into a PSA, and aired on all 3 network affiliates, 4, 5, and 7. I understood that bias and prejudice was not going to go away just because of this one campaign. I wanted to take it to another city, so it took off again in New York City the following year. Billboards, the subway, and the networks, CBS and NBC network TV aired the PSA so it could be seen and heard across the country. Fast forward, the message resonates now more than ever. Now more than ever. CBS network TV aired the PSA in 2019 for over a year. What impact does this poem have on individuals? Well, I've been told a few stories. One person told me it opened up her mind when I shared this poem with her over the phone, and there was a long silent pause. And I asked her, what happened? She said it opened up her mind. Another person, HR department of a hospital, when she read the poem, she thought it was challenging her and saying, well, who do you think you are? She read it a second time and she said she was humbled. Humility. We are all going to make mistakes as we go forward to embrace our differences. And when we do, let us have the humility to say sorry to one another. Sorry to one another. And we're all going to do the best we can to move forward and even come up with some wonderful, great ideas. And when we do, can we embrace those new ideas, get behind them, and have the humility to get behind them? The most profound story that was told to me was by a young woman who saw this poem hanging in a 4-foot by 8-foot graphic poster hanging in the YWCA because their first imperative is the elimination of racism. When she first saw the poem, she actually told me she hated it. Good thing I stood still to hear the rest of the story. Why did she hate it? Well, apparently the poem opened up the wounds, brought back all the memories of being discriminated growing up in Boston as an Asian American woman. And she said, after seeing the poem over and over again, she realized she had to learn how to let go of the past and forgive. She learned forgiveness. Dr. Zhu talked about spreading love and compassion. And many of you have spoken about positive love. Yes, and to love when you are experiencing discrimination takes courage. To not respond with hate, but with compassion and kindness takes a lot of courage. And I believe Garrett, Major General Garrett Yee, I believe you mentioned social media, radicalizing people. Social media didn't exist 30 years ago. It's here permanently. It is having a profound impact on our humanity. It's operating globally 24/7. I posed 2 questions to 2 young millennials. Both of them worked at a major bank. And I said, when was the last time you saw a tweet, a blog, a video that bullied, discriminated either one person or different groups. The young lady said she saw something like that 20 minutes ago. The young man said he saw something like that yesterday. Second question, when was the last time you saw a public service announcement that addressed all forms of discrimination, all of them in a transformative way? Both of them said, never, Sarah, until I met you. This poem, produced into a PSA, has been out since 1985. 1985. The message resonates now more than ever. Even Dr. King recognized we could pass all the laws we want, we cannot legislate the heart. And Albert Einstein said, you cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. You must stand on a higher ground. Recently, within 5 weeks, 44 digital billboards across 25 states were donated to World Unique to promote this Sun poem. So I applaud all of you, for the work you're doing and for the panelists for their courage in speaking out, and for Christine and Esther for putting this webinar together. I am honored to be with all of you, and I hope that my contribution can really advance all of us in moving forward to advance equality, diversity, inclusion for all of us.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And at this point, I would like to go ahead and bring on everyone else into this space so we could go ahead and continue the conversation for the next 20 minutes. Great. You know, just really quickly, just within just 1 minute, can you, each of you, go ahead and perhaps reflect the last, 16 months about what you've seen from the beginning to now during this pandemic, and have things changed, or, what are just some of your reflections on that?
Well, I can start by saying that in the last 16 months or 2 years, I experienced there was a tremendous of this misguided folks that were in America who adopted a view of patriotism that is narrow, exclusive, and hate-filled abomination. They are not patriots to me. Patriotism is a natural sense of pride in our nation's accomplishment and identity. So I would say that definitely the last 2 years, it was horrible. People was the hate-filled groups were very loud and vocal, and that I felt that Asian American did not speak up enough. That's why my pot boiled over when I felt that it's coming my way again, because I was attacked once in 2 years into the country in 1972, racially attacked. They thought I was Japanese, and I let that go. I went to the army, served 20 years, and I came out. I said, hey, I want to do something good for the community to make it a better place. And then this happened in the last 2 years. It was very vocal, very bold, in my face. I never experienced that before. And then the Atlanta shooting, and that caused me to boil over. And I felt it's enough. We need to speak up. If I don't speak up, I felt that that's when bad things happen. That's my 2 cents.
Wonderful. Any others that want to weigh in?
I'll jump in. Sometimes you'll hear, people say, well, we miss the good old days, right? And I'm not sure really what that means when we say the good old days. My mom spent, and her family spent the World War II years, behind barbed wire in the Arizona desert because they were Japanese Americans and interned during the war. Those weren't the good old days. And, my dad, his first language was Chinese, even though he was born here in America. He's born in Chinatown, San Francisco. And of course, just the whole, history there for anyone born in Chinatown, growing up, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, right? So when we hear the good old days, I'm not really sure what that means, for Asians really that grew up or lived in this country. But it seems like to me today that the polarization and the extremism that the federal government is at least finally talking about is something that probably existed back in the good old days, right? For America to get to the point of putting a bunch of American-born folks into these camps is pretty extreme thinking when you think about it. So the last 18, 24 months, have been a time where, there's been just increased rhetoric, increased bold statements in not just social media, but in mainstream, what we may call mainstream media, that I think gives people a license to leverage. Hey, they heard it on TV or they heard it somewhere and they repeat it, and that just is not at all constructive. It is destructive. And so maybe I'm trying to make the stretch of a parallel between the good old days, how things really were, and how things are today. And maybe 5-10 years ago we felt like we made some good progress. It feels like we've stepped back a bit and we've lost some ground. So back to you, Christine.
Thank you. And, for Dagny and Sara, especially since the Atlanta shootings, it seems like, because a lot more attention has been placed on what has been happening in reality since last year and also historically. So have you also seen changes since Atlanta within your own industries?
Well,
I can speak from the medical side in general. I mean, just since the pandemic started, we've seen quite a bit of irony and almost hypocrisy, because on the one side, physicians were being lauded for being healthcare heroes. We were on the front lines working 24/7 in pretty dire situations in the beginning when we didn't have enough PPE, and we were risking, the health of our families. When we would come home, we would strip all our clothes in the garage, throw it in the washer, take showers. We would social distance from our own families. I was 5 months pregnant when I made the video, and when I gave birth, we were very overprotective. Every time I came home from the hospital or the clinic, we were very careful. And my husband, he's also in healthcare. He was a dentist and seeing patients, and where the chance of contamination is the highest, through the oral cavity. So we were very much on high risk all the time, and we were being lauded for being on the front line. But at the same time, there was this other group who was, looking at Asian Americans as the cause of the virus, and so they were actually attacking Asian American healthcare providers on the front line and saying, go back to your country, as those physicians were taking care of very sick patients. They were, spitting in their faces. And so the amount of discrimination that we're seeing now with the pandemic was just so much more brazen than what we were used to. I guess back in the good old days, as you could say, I think anti-Asian sentiment has always been around, but I do think with social media and, the messages of hate that have been, perpetrated pretty universally nowadays, the level of just the brazenness of the hate is a lot more apparent than it was before.
Is it getting any better? I mean, especially now with the vaccines out, or is it still the same level of treatment?
I mean, I have to say the majority of people are good people. My patients, they respect me. They don't see the color of my skin. I think when we're talking about these things, we're talking about a very select group of extremists, as Major General Yi was saying. We're really speaking to luckily a minority. In my opinion, I still think it's a minority of the American population. I still have a lot of faith in this country. And I think that overall, we are all still united as Americans, and they do see us as human. And I do think that things are getting better with the vaccine, but certainly it took a long time to get there. And we had to overcome a lot of misinformation and a lot of fear mongering to get people even vaccinated.
Yeah.
Doctors have become the object of a lot of hate and even death threats on social media because we're taking on sort of anti-vaxxer groups, people with very extreme ideas. And no matter how much evidence you present some of these extremist groups, they will come after you and they won't really listen.
Yeah,
And then
If I may-
also for Sarah, there was a question here. It says that so true about not being able to legislate one's heart. How do you think we could best erase racism?
thank you so much. And I agree with Dr. Zhu and everybody else that it's really a minority group of people who have these extreme feelings of hatred, whether it's towards Asians, Blacks, Latinos, gays. So I really concur with everything that everybody has said. And I do want to emphasize and stress, because some of you have also said it, that social media is really having a profound impact on our humanity. It is. Because now people can amplify and promote their intolerance for differences. And there are a lot of weak minds who will just swallow it. And when you're in a very fearful state, it's much easier to swallow things that don't make any sense because you're operating out of fear. So we cannot create a law or a policy that's going to remove people's prejudice or biases. That will never happen, never. What we need to do is provide the tools, and in this case, a poem that engages each of us to look inside ourselves. But here's where the rub is, my friends. You cannot force somebody to look inside themselves, because we all agree prejudice and biases starts inside, in the heart. You can't force somebody to look at themselves. That's number one. Number two, you can't force people to be honest with themselves. Those two are very, very difficult. What we can do is we put this message out there and use the same techniques as the advertising world does. It's called the power of repetition. When you see something over and over and over again, it touches your heart and your mind and does the transformation, because the transformation has to take place within inside each of us. It's not the external, it's inside. When we do the transformation on the inside, it changes the outside. There's a great quote by Madame Curie that I came across within the last couple of weeks that really speaks to what I'm saying. And she said, "You cannot hope to build a better world without improving the individuals. To that end, each of us must work for our own improvements." So as we each do, each of you are leaders, and you model for your community and where you work what it means to be a courageous leader, to embrace humanity. And it does take so much courage, my friends, when you're experiencing discrimination, to still respond with compassion and kindness. And just to give you an example, I was accused one time of stealing my own sunglasses. How does that happen? And even when I held up the sunglasses to the security guards, asked me, did they pick it up? No, I don't know what was operating inside their head. All I know is this: common sense went out the window. And they wanted me to go into a room with them. To do what? To watch a video. And then my mind goes crazy, like, watch a video? Oh, I see, this is a setup. While I watch the video, you're gonna plant a brand new pair of sunglasses in my bag and I'm screwed. So I ran out. I only share that story with you. It's just one small example of the kind of unconscious biases that operate in people's heads. And we have no control over it, my friends. None, absolutely none. What we do have control over is what we put out on social media and the internet. And what I am sharing with all of you wonderful people and leaders is this simple poem that has been produced into a PSA. And by the way, it's been produced into a song. And we have this wonderful free program called Singing Equality Across America and around the world. Let's plant the seeds of equality in children so they don't have to face what we've been facing.
So I'm going to combine a couple of
Yeah.
these questions that we see just because we have only like about 10 minutes.
Sure.
So did you, for anyone that wants to lean in on this, I guess this is more for those who have been in the military. Do you experience overt racism while in the Army? Also, Jenner Yi, DISA is a high-tech organization. What are they doing to recruit high caliber AAPIs and retaining them?
Go ahead, Lee, on the racism.
I would say, because I'm retired, sure, there is some camouflage racism in the military. I'll give you an example. I served 20 years active duty and 6 years military police, and then 14 years as CID special agent. You know, almost everyone that retire at least get a meritorious service medal. That's a minimum. You know, they never put one in for me. And that's not something that I put it in. You know, and my boss is right there. And I even hint that, hey, that MSM looks really nice. Oh, it's like just pass them away. That's just some of the incidents. I think as in CID, as you know, there's very few Asian American. 20 some years ago, I was the pioneer, trailblazer, sure. But I learned in the military, participatory, get involved. This is all participatory democracy. Well, I get out to play basketball, throw my commanders more balls, even though he's a lousy shooter. But you know what? I play that game with him, and I get involved. I'm the first one to volunteer, you know, and I feel good. And I participated. Same thing when I get out to the civilian world. I learned that you need nothing's going to fall on my lap. I have to work for it, to participate, get involved in the community. And I also want to add that Dr. Zhu, I admire her that as a medical health doctor, health worker, you have to fight two battles. One is the coronavirus, and then you have to fight this racism, that's xenophobia. That's anti-Asian xenophobia is deep-rooted in our Western culture. It's not just 2 years ago. And that we've been marginalized, stereotyped, and that's is a really a concern. And I hope that that's just like Sara Ting said, it is a very minority group, but these are the hate-filled group. They are very boisterous, loud, and these are the ones that cause a lot of problems in our society. And I just hope that we Asian American need to speak up, to tell them, hey, enough is enough. We're not going to put up with it. We are here to we are smart. We are here to build a great nation, and we will continue to do that.
Thanks. I'll just add, you know, although the military is far from perfect, it tries to do its best to do the right thing, right? It does. It's a meritocracy. It strives to be. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. You know, we have had 4-star admirals in general, females. We've had Polish immigrants that have risen to the 4-star ranks. We had Colin Powell, African-American, you know, so we just have another 4-star African-American for the Air Force, Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So not at all perfect, but it does try to uphold the ideals of the Constitution. That said, on the question of DISA and hiring highly qualified AAPIs, it's actually even harder than that. You know, not a lot of Asians go in the military. DISA is a combat support agency, part of the Defense Department, and so not a lot of Asians, encourage their kids to join the military or support the military. Okay, so that's a battle right there, you know, so what I've done is, I've had engagements with high school kids. When I come back to California, in the Sacramento area in particular, and then with colleges, was out at UC Davis last year, and then Ohlone Community College, where I've been long connected to, and American River College out in the Sacramento area, where I talk about public service first. Start with like the bigger picture of public service, whether it be your community, the state, or federal government. We need America's best to go into public service, not just private sector, right? And then within that public service sector, whether it be a teacher, firefighter, police, also, administrators, et cetera, but also the military. Please consider the military as a viable option. And so my message and encouragement is broader than just come to work at our place, looking for AAPIs, but just people in general interested. And then when I speak to Asian communities, hey, you know what? Consider the military. Consider, and maybe not as in uniform, but as a civil servant, working in government, for the Defense Department, because we do have a lot of important civilian positions. And so that's what I do. I encourage, that kind of thinking, I guess.
General Yi is spot on. Asian American need to be more in public service, civil service, and military, because not all Asians should be doctors and engineers. These are the very important front line that can make changes in our society. Police officer, fireman, administrator, all kinds of opportunity, and then military, and I would say this, normally Asian American are twice as good, better.
Well, turning to Dr. Zhu, there's a couple of questions here. Why does it seem that there are still a significant number of medical professionals who are refusing to be vaccinated? And then also another question is, how is your mental health nowadays? How do you take care of yourself? And how would you suggest the younger generation take care of their mental and emotional health?
Those are great questions. I just wanted to add on what Mr. Lee Wong said. Even in medicine, Asian Americans are lacking in leadership. So even though 20% of physicians in America are Asian American, less than 1% of us are CEOs of hospitals, chairs of departments of medicine, leaders of large, biomedical companies. So there's a lack of Asian American leadership even within healthcare. And so I think in general, the message is to get more people from our community into leadership positions, including in medicine and healthcare and public health. To answer your question, why do some medical professionals still not get the vaccine? I don't know. I would say the majority of MD trained medical doctors believe strongly in science, and we believe strongly in vaccinations. I can't speak for other occupations like nurses or allied professionals. The training is a little bit different, and so the ideology might be a little bit different. And again, some people are just split based on their partisan beliefs more so than what they were trained, from their educational background. So I can't speak for everyone, but I can say that the majority who have been medically trained, we all, support the guidelines of the CDC and the WHO. In terms of mental health, that's a great question. I mean, we're seeing so much of our youth suffer from mental health in greater numbers than ever before. And I think, again, social media is a large part of that and something that is negatively affecting a lot of the youth. I think the biggest thing to do is just encourage, take away the stigma of mental health. People for the longest time have been afraid to talk about it. It was seen as a disease, as a problem, something that was not accepted by society. But I think more and more we can use social media to our advantage to kind of destigmatize mental health, to kind of normalize it as it's a problem that affects a lot of people, and to advise people to seek help and talk to others when you need it. That's the biggest thing that you can do, is just to talk to people who have the same problems, talk to professionals, find a support system.
Wonderful. I know a great way to do that is really through the arts and music. So one of the questions for Sara Ting is, what role do you think art, music, or literature might play in creating better relationships between different ethnic groups? And also, there have been a request to share your poem in the PSA in the chat.
Right. So, okay. Thank you so much for that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for that question, because right on the mark, the arts plays a critical role to heal us and bring us together. especially music, especially music. Music is universal. You don't even have to speak the same language. If you hear a song, a note, it just does something to the heart and to the soul. There's a great quote by Aristotle. I'm a lover of quotes. He said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. It's our hearts that need to be educated. And I'm sad to tell you that in many schools, the arts low on the totem pole. In some schools, no music, taken away. So I raise that up because we don't seem to understand the power of the arts that is so critical to the development of the whole human being. We don't seem to understand that. And if we did, all schools across this country needs to have music and the children an opportunity to sing. Many of us have spoken here and saying, speaking up. Music helps us find our voice. And you're probably all going to find this hard to believe, but maybe you had the same comment on your report cards. So I was a good student. I got very good grades. But the one comment all of my teachers made? She's too quiet. We wish she would speak up. I would say for the first 18 years of my life, I was quiet. I didn't speak up. It took a while for me to find my voice. Now that I have found it, yes, I am speaking up. And I applaud each of you for speaking up. And the most important point I want to say, and I'm so happy to hear each of you are speaking up, not to promote any anger or vengeance, but to promote kindness, love, and compassion. And I know it is so hard to do. When people are throwing discrimination at you, hatred, words that are so hurtful, the arts, my friend, plays a role. And so when you talk about mental health, find a music that soothes your mind, puts you in a very calm, peaceful place, and use that song every day before you start your day to listen to it, to heal your mind and your heart. Or find a positive affirmation, something that's going to get you grounded in your humanity. The Sun poem for me has been a tremendous source of strength. Because if you think about it, the sun shines on all of us. That means it shines on our opinions, our ideology. So as Mr. Wong said, no one's superior. We're all equal. The sun reminds us of our common humanity. So yes, the arts plays a vital role, and find a song that heals you and soothes you. And I hope that I can share with your wonderful group. We do have a song called We All See the Stars. And you can see a video of 800 children singing the song and doing the verse in sign language, 800.
So I want to go ahead and wrap up with a question to all of you. What brings you hope and what is your ask of others? I always like to end my discussions with a homework assignment for everyone to take away from this discussion. So whoever would like to start.
Well, I would say that the Chinese American Heritage Foundation already have all these talking points out. Is encourage all Americans to speak up when they hear microaggressions, call out misinformation or racist jokes, address harmful behaviors, and intervene by calling for help when they see violence and abuse. And these are all our fellow Asian American. We need to solidify, stay together, help each other, do the right thing. We don't want to splinter groups here and there. Let's work together and make this happen. Get the right message out. We will not tolerate any more violence and abuse.
I'll go next. What gives me hope? Our youth. Our kids grew up in a much more open and accepting view of their world. Whether you be Afghan, African American, LGBTQ, those unconscious biases that we grew up with, are different for the youth growing up today. And so they're exposed to a lot more. So that gives me hope. You know, my kids, millennials, right? What can we do? Well, you know, hunt the good stuff, right? Look for good things that are happening around us today, and there are good things. And then to Sarah's point, amplify those through social media, because we need to counter the message that's out there, and that's how you do it. So, and we all could do that. Interesting.
Good
So
point.
what gives me hope is the fact that we're all here tonight speaking out, and not just us, but our entire community. I feel like it's the first time in a long time, or maybe ever, that I've seen the Asian American community so vocal to finally speak up for ourselves, not kind of hang our heads down, being an obedient. That's kind of what we've been known for, stereotypically. But I really do feel like now we're speaking up more than ever. And the fact that, you know, I can be here as a physician to share my story with the platform that I have on social media to share this message of positivity, you know, that gives me hope. I came, you know, from a immigrant background. My mom came here from China. You know, she's working restaurants, cleaning motels. We literally grew up on food stamps with nothing. And the fact that I could get through the American education system, become a physician today, and, you know, be able to speak with all of you tonight and spread this message, that gives me hope. And in terms of what we should continue doing is to, you know, continue speaking out. And not all of us may have a platform to speak out on. You know, some of us might be timid to speak out on social media, but it really starts within your own circle. So I just ask you to look into yourself and look into your own circle, your friends and family. When you hear something that doesn't sound right, when you hear people's, you know, unconscious biases, reflect on your own unconscious biases and call it out and speak up as much as you can.
So I echo what Major General Garrett said, children, the youth. I would add to that, being the poet, as long as the sun shines, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. And here's another short poem. Dare to be as great as the sun, dare to shine on everyone. So what I call everybody to do is to share the poem, the PSA. And if all of us continue to do work on ourselves so we can be courageous leaders like each one of you, and speak out in a compassionate way and in a way that can lead others to their humanity. What comes out of being willing to step out of your comfort zone is called personal and professional growth. You cannot grow if you stay in your comfort zone. And in order to embrace diversity and inclusion, you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. And the reward, my friends, will be personal and professional growth. So dare to be as great as the sun, dare to shine on everyone.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to our panelists for being such an inspiration. I encourage all of you, you know, May should not be the only time that we celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. There's been a lot of great content that's been created throughout this entire month. I know personally, I haven't even been able to dig through and experience all of it, but I encourage everyone to use this content to continue the conversation as we move forward. And there's still a lot of work to do, but I know that in my 27 years of doing this as an activist here in Washington, D.C., working with grassroots, this is the first time I've seen so many different sectors, so many individuals and organizations that are leaning into their identity and being joining in on this moment and bringing others from other communities to join us as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, Dr. Zhou.
So much.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Night,
Night.
Generally.